Hello everybody, welcome back to today's video. Today I'm doing the first ever prediction of the US Senate in the 2026 midterms. If you're curious about how the US House is looking at, you should check out my video about that. Seems like you guys really enjoyed that, appreciate it. But in today's video, nonetheless, we're going to be talking about who's going to control the US Senate. Now, I already predicted how the House is going to go, but the Senate is equally as important, if not more important, because this is the upper chamber of the legislative branch, and I think that if Democrats have any chance, which they should be able to, just because it's the party out of power, they have a better chance at flipping the House and the Senate. Nonetheless, there's some still pathways for them, and there's some pathways for the GOP to hold its own and maybe pick up a seat or two. A lot of scenarios that can happen next year, but today we're going to be predicting the U.S. House. So let's just start off with states that are going to be safe margin, 10 points or more. You can all pretty much agree that Oregon is going to be a safe Democrat state. We can agree that Colorado will be safe, Illinois will be safe, Massachusetts and Rhode Island will be safe, New Jersey and Delaware will be safe. I think Cory Booker will win over 10 points, as well as Virginia, who I think will just barely be over 10. It's possible, it's likely, but I think it's going to be over 10 just because Democrats sort of rebounded and regained some of the votes that they had lost in recent years. So I think that'll be a safe Democrat win for what seems to be a strong incumbent, Mark Warner. I think that's about it. We'll go over safe states for the Republicans. You have Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma. Kansas will be safe as long as Therese Davis doesn't run, so I don't think she will. Laura Kelly, the popular Democrat governor, she said she's not running. This will be a safe Republican seat. Arkansas will be safe. Louisiana will be safe. Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, South Carolina, and we're going to include Florida. That sums up all of the safe Republican states. These states will be over 10 points. They're not expected to be competitive at all. So people could make a case that Florida's going to be under 10. I don't think it will be because you see in the last few years it's just shifted towards the Republicans by so much. I really just don't think it's going to go back. And they have a strong Republican incumbent, Ashley Moody, who has served as the Attorney General there. Seems to be a very strong incumbent appointed by Ron DeSantis to fill Marco Rubio's seat. This will be a safe margin. Let's go to the likely Democrat seats. This is where it starts to get a little more competitive. This will be between 5 and 10 points. I'll say New Mexico will be just right under. Shoot, is it glitching? Sorry about that. New Mexico will be under 10 points, just barely for the Democrats. This is Ben Ray Lujan. He'll win re-election by a lot. It could be safe depending on what the environment is, but I think that's going to be a likely Democrat win. You have pretty much, I think that's the only likely Democrat state we have here. Oddly enough, it's kind of weird. We have Minnesota too. I think, spoiler alert, this will be less competitive than the governor's election. So be sure to stay tuned for the governor's video that'll be coming out shortly. But I don't think this will be competitive. Those likely Democratic states. We have quite a few likely Republicans. This is the key. If Democrats want to have any chance in the Senate, they want to at least be competitive in these likely Republican states, or even win one or two of them. We're going to start with Alaska. You have Dan Sullivan. Unless Mary Peltola runs, I don't think this might even go over safe. We're going to keep it likely out of caution. She was a U.S. representative there. She did lose her re-election, so she's kind of a mixed record. That's likely Republican. You have Nebraska with incumbent Pete Ricketts. I think that he will win by a likely margin. He's facing Independent Dan Osborne. Unless the Democrats run their nominee, I think Osborne will get some of the moderate Republicans as well as pretty much all the Democrats and the Independents to vote. However, Nebraska is just too red of a state. I see the Republican incumbent winning. Plus, he's pretty wealthy. He can self-fund his campaign. And he's a stronger incumbent than Deb Fischer was, who ran a more competitive race where she shouldn't have had against Dan Osborne 2 years ago. Plus, he was the former governor, so he seems to be, I suppose, a good fit for the state. Iowa, Iowa can be competitive. We'll just have to see how it goes. It's hard to tell what the margin is really going to be. That's likely Republican. And then you have Ohio, which is surprisingly interesting because you see an Ohio shift to the right a lot over the last few years. It's had some Republican trends. Democrats tend to do slightly better at the national level than the Republicans do at the national level. They do, sorry, at the state level, but it's all It's a very pretty Republican state now. You have Democrat Sherrod Brown running, who was a strong Democrat incumbent. I just think the state has just moved too right for him to win. You saw him lose by 3 points to Republican Bernie Moreno, which wasn't as strong of a Republican candidate. He still lost. He did outperform Kamala Harris in the state by a lot, like 8 points, and Donald Trump won it, Ohio by 10. So you might say, well, he's a strong candidate, which he is. He did overperform the top of the ticket. I just think Ohio is too red of a state, and now he's versing a more formidable Republican. This time, the incumbent, who was appointed by Mike DeWine, John Husted, who was the lieutenant governor. He's more establishment. He's kind of in the middle between the more MAGA anti-establishment Republican and the traditional conservative establishment Republican. He's kind of right in the middle, so he doesn't seem to upset his party. I think he's a reasonably good fit for the state. He's won some statewide elected offices before. He just seems to be a strong incumbent. We'll keep an eye on Ohio. It could get under 5. I just think it's going to stay likely Republican. And then you have Texas. I think Texas will be likely Republican. It's going to be a very competitive Republican primary. You have Ken Paxton, the more Trump-aligned Republican. He has had some scandals, cheating with his wife or something. He's had some other charges pressed against him from even his own party. However, he seems to have the base behind him. You have John Cornyn, the incumbent Republican U.S. Senator. He's not really polling too great for an incumbent. He's a little more establishment, so the base doesn't like him, especially that. And then you have Wesley Hunt, which is a U.S. representative. He's seen as more of the compromise candidate, so he's kind of in the middle. I think it's possible he wins. I think Cornyn is the strongest general election contender, followed by Wesley Hunt, followed by Ken Paxton. Ken Paxton is not the most electable candidate. However, he still won statewide elected offices before. And just to balance that out between the three and out of caution, this will be a likely Republican state. However, it could go safe just because Donald Trump won it by so much. We'll see how it turns out. And that is all of the likely states. We're going to move on to lean Democrat states, which seems to be a lot. I guess we'll start in the Northeast with New Hampshire. You have Democrat Jeanne Shaheen retiring. If she ran for re-election, it would be a safe Democrat. However, since she's not running for re-election, it's only going to go down to lean because you had Scott Brown running, which he's still running. He seems to be a good candidate. I just think he's lost a lot of his appeal that he used to have. And he's not polling too well. This was originally going to be a likely to safe Democrat win. However, it's dragged down to lean because he's probably going to lose a primary to John Sununu, the brother of Chris Sununu. It's the Sununu name is popular in New Hampshire, and he was a former senator there, so he's won before. He seems to be a strong candidate. Democrats feel happy about not nominating Chris Pappas, who's the Democrat representative, overperformer from the eastern part of the state. Both strong candidates. I just think that the national environment, for Democrats being favored at least a little bit, should carry Pappas over the finish line. This is a race to watch. Usually, New Hampshire doesn't usually go along with national trends, but I just think just because of it. And New Hampshire is usually a swing state, right? It's kind of Republican at this state level, but at the national level, it definitely leans to the left. So I think Chris Pappas will win the seat. And then you have a few more competitive states down south. You have, I'll say, we're going to do Georgia right now because you have John Ossoff, the Democrat incumbent. It's kind of hard to say how strong of an incumbent he is. He is strong because he did take down David Perdue, which was a strong Republican incumbent in 2020. However, that was a blue-leading environment, and it was only because of a runoff. and he also lost a U.S. House race before that. So it's hard to say. I think John Ossoff is a strong incumbent. I'm going to say that he wins. Republicans are kind of divided about who they're going to nominate against him, and he seems to be leading in all of the polls. And usually incumbents in swing states, especially if the party favors them, are usually going to win re-election. Um, I could see it getting more competitive. If they had Brian Kemp, the Republican governor, run, I think this would be a very easy Republican flip. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think John Ossoff will win re-election. Kind of confident about that. And we have North Carolina, which is really hard to predict. All of Michigan are really the hardest states for me to predict, just because you have a really interesting race playing out. You have Roy Cooper, the Democrat. He was a former governor. He's attorney general there before that. He's a strong Democrat candidate. He usually does pretty well. He's well known. He seems to be likable for the state. He won 2 times being governor, while Donald Trump and Republican Senate candidates have won statewide. Roy Cooper, the Democrat, won at the same time. Definitely a strong candidate. However, just because you're electable at the governor's mansion does not mean you're electable to the U.S. Senate. They don't translate to each other. However, North Carolina is a swing state, and he seems to have name recognition. He's leading in the polls. However, he usually underperforms the polls by around 4 or 5 points. And that's what they show Roy Cooper up right now. I still think he's the narrow favorite. I'm reading this at Tilt Democrat. You have Michael Whatley, the Republican, running, who seems to be strong. He seems to be a good fundraiser. He just has to get his name out there. If he can get more name recognition, he'd probably make this race really competitive. I think it's going to be more competitive than you think, because I still think Roy Cooper's advantage, but Democrats don't really do too well at the national level in North Carolina. Republicans usually seem to do well. A lot of the times they show Democrats they're going to win it, and they never do. So I'm going to say that he wins, but Michael Whatley really could give Roy Cooper a run for his money. Now let's go down to the lean Republican or tilt Republican states. We'll start with Maine. You have Susan Collins. I think she is running for re-election. A lot of people, pundits, say she's going to lose. I tend to doubt it, just because they have underestimated her a lot over the years, especially in 2020. Susan Collins won by 9 points, while Joe Biden won it by 9. Big overperformance. She seems to get the Republican base to turn out. For her, she has to do that again, obviously, in 2026, and get the moderate Democrats and independents. I think it's possible she loses. However, it's hard to say what the Democrat primary is going to be, because it's against Graham Plattner, who's had some scandal come out about him recently, some tattoos that were really bad. He's not a strong general election candidate, but he's a good primary candidate. And then Democrats also are running Janet Mills, who's the Democrat governor, who seems to be more establishment, but she's pretty old. So Susan Collins is old too, but I think she's a slight favorite just because she's the incumbent and she's won some tough elections. I'm giving this to the Republicans, but we'll see how it goes. And I saved the best state for last, which is Michigan. Now, a lot of people think, well, Michigan is going to go Democrat because they've elected a Democrat senator for all these decades. And I could say, yeah, that's a good point. However, Republicans are running Mike Rogers in the state of Michigan, who, by very, very little bit, lost in 2024 to a strong Democrat candidate, Melissa Slotkin. However, he's running again in the primary, and I can make a whole video about this, but it's very interesting. I'm going to give Mike Rogers a very, very narrow victory in Michigan, just because I think there's always that one state that seems to be like, what the heck happened? I think that's going to be Michigan, just because Gary Peters, the Democrat incumbent, is not running for re-election. We have Mike Rogers, who seems to unify his party to get the nomination, and then you have 3 Democrats running, which is Haley Stevens, Mallory McMorrow, and Abdul El-Sayed. There's a lot of debate over which one of those 3 is the strongest candidate, both in the primary and especially the general. You've had some minor scandals come out about them, but not really. The Democrat Party doesn't seem to be unified behind their candidate, and Mike Rogers seems to be actually leading a good amount of the polls. And you should see the governor's election be very, very competitive. I think the Democrat nominee will be Haley Stevens, and the Republican nominee will be Mike Rogers. But just because the Democrat primary is divided, and there's usually that one state that just seems to go the other way, just based on candidate quality or whatever. I think that'll be Michigan. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Hope you have a good day, and come back to this channel for some more election content.